Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Workshop. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am stoked because we got an old friend of mine, Ed's on here for his first time. This is going to be awesome. Now, while I'm excited, y'all should be excited too. So make sure you guys are doing all the things, liking the show, subscribing to the channel, hitting notification bell, doing all that good stuff, getting your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for the workshop, Fridays for the collective. Except for this week, the collective is going to be tomorrow. So make sure you are pinned in on that one. If you have not already, make sure you're signed up for the reinforcement loop. There's our weekly newsletter, goes out every week. And you have all the information from the shows, as well as some good old brain candy from Shaun, which is soon to be brain candy for me once I start writing them in the summer. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We'll hit those throughout the show. Other than that, let's get into this. So right off the bat, Ed, give us a little quick 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff. Hit us up.
Awesome. Well, first off, just thank you guys for having me. I appreciate being here. And just with the opening, I'm like, oh, I'm sharing the show with a lot of cool people. So yeah, my name's Ed. I was in the military with Chance as an engineer, deployed on the same deployment. After that, I got into fire and EMS, and now I'm a retired guy and a new dad, just doing my best to work that and do my best at it.
The new dad part is always it's a realm in and of itself. I remember looking back on it going like, I should be able to handle this. I know what I'm doing. And then no, I don't. I had no idea.
I had big dreams of just working out all the time and hanging and just getting jacked. And yeah, that was quickly ended with how much attention they need.
Absolutely. Shaun, how's life out in the mountains treating you?
Yeah, things are good. You know, a couple of thoughts in my head right now. One is that I didn't know that you two knew each other, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd mentioned a Chance that there's this guy, and I loosely described you, and I said, yeah, I think we should have him on, blah blah blah. And then Chance dropped the old, oh yeah, well just hang on a sec, and gave me the inside scoop of you guys were holding hands together for quite a long time. So that was good. And then the second thing that is interesting to me is when I've been following you, of course, I can relate to the father and raising kids and all of that good stuff. And maybe we'll talk about that in the show. But my main thought is this: how fun is it for you, Ed, to come onto the show and watch Chance just like smoothly deliver his intro like a seasoned pro? I mean, you know, a few years ago, we weren't doing this, and now Chance is kind of the man to some degree. And is it cool to see like another combat engineer kind of just crushing?
You know, it's always good to see the guys thriving. You know, it makes you happy every time you haven't heard from someone in a while, and then you catch up and they're just killing it at life. And so, yeah, and I was impressed with that intro. I was like, oh, he's got this.
Yeah, he does have it for sure. Yeah. I just checking in to make sure that you know we're well calibrated, etc.
Yeah,
I love it. This is the beauty of this is what social media I think really needs to be more about, is connecting with friends and being able to see what they're doing and seeing how they're kicking ass throughout life, because it's so easy to just separate from that old life, from all the things that you used to do, and then it can become resentful at times. It's just like, oh man, I miss that so much, or I wish I had never left, and you start to get stuck in those old times rather than looking at today and going, man, look how freaking awesome Ed is doing over there with the Fountainhead Tattoo Shop and learning art and trying to be a dad and figure this all out live on the internet. Like it's awesome. It's just awesome to see.
Your question kind of ties into like a little bit when Chance asked me, what are we going to talk about? And I just had this awesome conversation with 2X engineers, and I brought it here, Captain Hallett's book, Unconventional, about our tour. If you haven't read it, definitely pick it up. But what it did, I started reading this book, and he's going through like the training aspects and stuff. And it really was just a throwback for me. So I was just thinking of all these fun times in training. And, anyways, ended up having a conversation with two other engineers. And we just got into this long conversation about, the carnage of troop stores, like the different stories and things like that. And for me, a guy with PTSD, and I've been doing therapy almost weekly for like a decade now. So sometimes when you're in that mode and you're just working on kind of the therapy side, you can have this maybe lens that things were like horrid, or like you're often like working on kind of some of the trauma or some of the events, or kicking yourself for, oh, I wish I would have done this, where people disappointed in me. And it can kind of color the past a little bit with a darker lens. And then just this recent conversation we had where we were just having so much fun. Like just one of the stories I'll bring up is, and Chance will remember this, is you're just sitting in troop stores, everyone's having a fun time, and then the lights turn out and 20 glow sticks are cracked, and you just dive for cover because you know someone's about to whip a glow stick at your head. You don your like milk crate helmet to like try to protect your face from like the carnage of guys whipping different things at you. And that's just like a normal, 11 o'clock on a Tuesday in troop stores. And thinking back to that, being a 19, 20-year-old kid with guns and explosives and making these friendships, just that's kind of why we were like, oh, this is like a cool thing to kind of concentrate on, is just looking back with more of those rose-colored glasses and really diving into the fun situations that we all got ourselves in, and just the being young and in the engineers and making friends and friendships that'll last a lifetime, and just some of the weird stuff we would do, like glow stick fights, or Chance mentioned heater bombs. I don't know if you ever got into that. You throw one of the heating packs in a water bottle that would like heat up your rations, and just run into like two troops stores, throw it in there, close the door, and run away.
The beauty of being 19 and not thinking about consequences at the time. This is
Yeah.
Shaun, I'm sure there were some hijinks in your back in the day when you were in. And I want you to, when you think about this, live in the good old days, and you're hearing Ed's stories, what comes up in your head?
Some that I can't even talk about, so
Yeah,
we'll
right
just move those off the table. But one way, there's a couple of things that I thought as Ed was talking there. One is this idea about the lens, how you view the world today versus how you viewed it years ago and how you'll view it in the future. I just finished writing, or not wrong, polishing up a chapter that speaks specifically about the lens, how we view our world, how it expands and contracts, how we see deeper or how we see shallower. And that lens is something that we have to actively manage every single second of our lives. It's not just a theoretical model that you can casually remind yourself of once a week or once a month. It's something that we're literally doing every single second of our lives. It's whether we're aware of it or not. And the upstream actions of this lens moving while we're unconscious of it is something that people should get better at managing consciously. But that's for another show, perhaps. The second thing that I was thinking about is, as I was listening to Ed and watching his response, I could see how much he was enjoying not only telling the story, but he was enjoying being back in that moment. He was there in that moment with the milk crate on his head, which, by the way, would have had to have been a pretty freaking large milk crate. And so I think that one of the interesting things about that is, as Ed was telling the story, he's re-experiencing joy to some degree, the good times, as it were. And that's all well within our power. Within a split second, we can almost mentally medicate ourselves up or down in a way that is completely under our own control. And so Ed could do that every single minute for the rest of the day stay up, stay elevated, stay positive, stay connected to the past with all of those joyful memories, or in a split second, flip that binary switch and turn it all dark and negative. And that one time I had to peel potatoes for my entire life because of ... sergeant, whoever. And so that's for us. That dial is for us to control. So this topic that we're dealing with right now, you know, kind of thinking back to the good old days, as it were, and the bad old days, that's something that is completely under our control constantly. We just don't talk about it that much.
I 100% agree. That's where I was going to go to, is that we have to seek to choose. We have to like look for the choice, and because it can be detrimental on both sides of the coin as well. Like if you look only at how awesome it was back in the day, then that can color how you see the present. Because if it was all awesome back then what is it right now? Right. And that that the difference between those things can be very extensive. But also, to your point, if all we think about is the negative of how horrible it was and how that person was mean to me, or these things happened, or I regret doing that, or whatever, those things create they affect our now as well. And I think being able to use the slider analogy that, Shaun, you're talking about, is being able to gauge what do I need out of this right now. So like if a memory pops up in your head, or you see an old friend, and do you need to go, oh man, that was the dude that was mean to me, or I remember the time that you punished me to do this thing because of etc.
The reality is, though, that the slider is always engaged. It's whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you've constantly got your finger on the pulse of that slider. You are actively moving the slider up and down, either aware or unaware. It's always in play, always. And it's whether you shape the direction of how you manipulate that slider every single second of your life. You know, Ed was telling the story, and, you know, he's aware of the story because he's telling it, but maybe he's not aware of how deeply reconnected he is to the good times, as it were. On a surface level, I'm sure he's aware, but maybe later today, when he's got some quiet time, he'll be able to introspect on how he felt when he was telling that story, and he might like reconnect to an even deeper level or an even deeper meaning. And that's the way the slider works. You're either aware of it or you're not. And once you're aware of it, it's how deeply aware of it you are.
I think too, it's like you mentioned, like peeling potatoes, and just that even the times that we look back on that might have been, you know, you just like, for me, what popped up in my head when you said that was on my very first exercise in 1CR, I forgot my BFA. And the world ended. And I remember I had to make a sandbag thrown while it was raining for my sergeant. I don't know. And I guess I just won't mention his name but it was raining and it was miserable. And I had to make him this little throne out of sandbags that took me like a good hour and a half, just in the rain, miserable. And while I was doing it, obviously I was like, misery, like it sucked. But now that lens that we're looking through, I look back and I'm like, man, I wouldn't trade that punishment for anything, because that memory is so nice now to look back and be like, oh man, that was wild. He made me do that. But I look back with like such a fondness now of even that punishment. And that might just be how we're all wired. I know Chance is a hunter as well. And sometimes we seek out these super miserable experiences that end up being the most fun we can have, just through kind of that, I guess, not typical kind of fun. But that lens part reminded me that even some of the punishment or the hard times end up being some of your fondest memories that you look back on with a smile.
Yeah. I think there's pride involved, right? In the fact that, hey, we survived this. Like I made it through this particular thing. But also the ability to gauge how we look at these moments, I think, comes through the continual, I can't say continual rehashing, but like every so often being able to go back and look at it. So it can be super awesome the first time you remember that one moment where you're like, oh, that thing happened. Ha ha, ha, that's awesome. And then to Sean's point, the next time you go over it, it'll be, oh, that thing taught me this lesson that I applied throughout the rest of my life. And then you go back on a third time. And similar to when we were talking about the books last week, Sean, was the fact that the story isn't changing, but you are. And what you're actually being able to see from that, what you're able to pull from that becomes deeper, it becomes more developed. You start to grow within it. What do you got, Sean?
So to your point, like I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the newsletter that I sent you yesterday, but I specifically call that out. I called you out in the newsletter in a positive way, of course, in the sense that, you went back and revisited that same book at least 3 different phases of your life, and each phase it was different to you. And so, the idea being the slider that Ed, that story that he just recalled, that slider that he moves it up and down, positive or negative, shallow or deep. Okay, those are all independent, or those are all individual learnings that he'll gain from that. And then what? Like, how does he proliferate that out into his life? His family will be impacted by it. He doesn't ever have to tell the story, but his family was impacted by it 5 years ago. Whether he said a word or not. Now, if Ed takes that story, consolidates it, and then externalizes it into a positive thing, and then starts telling that message in a way that everyone gets it, well, now everyone understands where his lesson came from. But like all the lessons that we get from all of those little moments, sometimes we articulate them in a way that someone understands where the learning was anchored. But then there's other times where, that one thing happened and blah, 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 and you can't articulate it, but, your wisdom many years later isn't attached to a story. And so now you're handing out wisdom without an anchored story. And then other times you're handing out wisdom with an anchored story. And I think that, one of the beautiful parts about social media is we can really relay all of this. But then the ignorant part of social media is, if there's no anchor to the story, now, is it contrived? Is it inauthentic? Is it a story stolen from someone else? Is it artificially made up as a fantasy story that you can hand off to someone else, but isn't anchored in reality? And so I think the way Ed told the story, it's evident that it was a real thing. And it's evident that he's got lessons from it. But I think the greater point is this. You've got to figure out the stories. You've got to figure out a way to pass them along as lessons to others, not just lessons to yourself. I feel that is the penultimate sort of height of a story, is not just what you gain from it, but how you can help others gain from it. And that storytelling is a trick. So, I know Ed has that talent, but I'd just like to call out that for all of us, we've just got to get better at deploying that talent to some degree.
That's a great point.
I think there's like when you're talking about that kind of knock-on effect of you remembering in a positive way and how you move forward from that, there is something there, like I mentioned, being kind of in the thick of therapy. We probably all know guys who are dealing with some harder times right now. And one of the things that popped into my head was like, how do we, proliferate that knock-on effect? Is if you have this fun story and you're in a place where you're looking back with the rose-colored glasses, or you're looking back, call somebody, call your buddy. And sometimes we often call for these like serious, like, how you doing, man? Like, okay, like times are tough, just know, push through, like that kind of thing. And we're calling in like a more serious fashion. But like I said, the conversation I had with those 2 guys, it was like me and one buddy, and then we hooked another buddy into like the 3-way call, and we're like, dude, do you remember that time? And it put us all in that access to the slider, like you were talking about. So sometimes the knock-on effect is, if you're in that place where you're looking back with a positive lens, there might be a buddy who's having a rough time who could really use that positive memory, and just giving them a call and just taking it a little less serious. Our lives can be so serious sometimes. So just giving them that call and sharing your memory of, like, maybe it's their story and you were like, dude, I was telling a story about that time you messed up and you just got like, I don't know, like you had an ND and we all like were fine, you know, all of a sudden you're the only guy standing with no one's around you and we're all staring at you, even though like maybe that was a bad story in his mind at the time. Now I bet you're looking back and you're all gonna laugh about it. So just with your comment about social media, even taking it a step back and just you personally probably know a guy who could use that slider and access to it, because it does seem like if you are in a darker place and you're working maybe through something, the ability to look back just out of your own, just where you are, sometimes it's everything looks dark back there. And it sometimes it just takes a friend with a little more positive mindset to remind you that, oh, it wasn't all doom and gloom, and it was actually like, you know, there was the doom and gloom, but there was some real fun, you know, just jovial times.
I think that's definitely part of it, is the fact that a lot of these things, especially from the military and any real service oriented profession, is that we do it as a team, right? And a lot of times being able to share the stories like you guys are talking about is critical. But I think that's even beyond that. It is the highest level of service, is to be able to pass on the information, as Shaun is saying, in a way that even if we didn't serve together, even if we were in completely different branches, even if we were in different, that's, I mean, the whole reason for this podcast is to be able to bring information and wisdom to the masses. The information is all here, and the stories are all here, and the lessons are all here for everybody to pick up on as they interpret it. But I think that's what this is the higher level of service. Shaun, what do you got?
You're right. And so just want to use our conversation as an example or contrast, perhaps. So, we can spend the rest of the show, just the three of us, talking about three things or things that interest the three of us. We won't expand our conversation outside of the laughs. We'll talk about peeling potatoes and how much that sucked, but we could do a whole show laughing about that. And we'd be serving ourselves. We would be three dudes looking into the circle at each other and quietly talking about the good times, the bad times. That'd be okay. But that actually isn't our job on the podcast. Our job is to do that while simultaneously expanding out in a concentric circle so that anyone beyond the campfire, as it were, can overhear what we're talking about and maybe glean some wisdom from it, correct? And so when we talk about, like, I'm using Ed as the example now, him and his two friends are in a call, and it's the laughy McLaughs, and everyone's having a good time, and the doom and gloom is in the rearview mirror. Everyone's stoked, and the call ends, and then, maybe it doesn't happen again for another year, or maybe it doesn't happen again for another 6 months, or whatever the timeline is, but it's too long. And I think one of the reasons that it's too long is because these moments are treated like almost an entertainment value, where we're going to raise the spirit of the room, and then that's it. But what I'm suggesting is when these calls happen, you're supposed to connect, and you're supposed to have fun, and you're supposed to have like common ground, but then you're supposed to learn something from it. You're supposed to be better from it at the end of the conversation. And the question I'm going to throw at you guys is, do you let that happen organically, like magically unfold by itself, like hopefully crossing all of our fingers that something good comes of the conversation other than laughs? Or do you actively pursue making the group better? Because that's what I do. Option 2. But I think you can do both things simultaneously, but you have to craft it. You have to be intentional. What are your thoughts?
Ed, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think that it's like, especially it's like, if you've got something out of something, what's the way to, like, that conversation will say, what's the way to give back? And is it intentional? And I would say, like, for me, I mean, I wish I could say it was more intentional, but I think it's more organic for me, and I think that's something I'm working on daily. I mean, what pops into my head is just my meditation practice and the ability to not identify with every thought or feeling that comes into your head, and cherry picking the ones that are going to bring something to you or the people around you or something. So I think I'm working on the intentionality of that. And I think Shaun's reminder to, you know, to really live in that moment with that conversation. But then there's also, like, as somebody who's been in a service type job, or just the kind of man you are who wants to serve others, taking that conversation and taking it a step further. And in a way, that's what we're doing on this conversation. So yeah, I think it's a working towards being more intentional every day, and also realizing that sometimes it's just like that thought's going to come into your head, and then you're going to identify and then try to jump on it and share that with the people that could use it the most. So interesting point for sure.
I like this this concept, Shaun, and it made me think of the fact that I had to be intentional in my conversations through here. This, like, the reps of me doing the podcast, moderating, and constantly
Mhm.
taking the temperature of the conversation, especially digitally, just trying to read people in the little boxes on the side here that I have. Um, that gave me the ability to let it happen authentically now. So, like, I had to do the practice of it to the point that now it becomes organic. Uh, Not to say that I can't actively then additionally go into it and say, oh, how can I make this a lesson for everybody here, not just the 2 or 3 people? Or how do I get, as you like to say, how do I plant seeds so that they're going to take it to somebody else and start doing the same thing to them? And I think that is that started to happen just recently within the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 months. I've noticed myself doing it, and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, you're good at it though. You're good at it now though. But you know, isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that a beautiful case study of when we first started the podcast? You actually didn't read people as well as you do now. I was going to say you didn't read people well. But you read people well enough, just not nearly as well as you read them now. And to your point, the interesting thing about digital versus analog. So Ed, just on a phone with his friends, is going to have to work way, way harder just on a phone than he is if he can have a video call with his friends. And then he's having to work harder in that video call to get the micro cues, to get the data, to get the vibe off of his friends, versus if it was just the 3 of them standing around leaning against a wall out in the back 40 in 3D. And so all of these layers that we interoperate in obligate us to find a way to communicate in that medium so that we are getting the granularity of it. And Chance, now you have the granularity. You're really quite good at micro cues on digital. And so isn't it helpful? Doesn't it make your life easier, but more correctly, doesn't it make it richer?
Absolutely. For instance, I was teaching class this morning, and I picked up on a really interesting cue that one of my students was starting to get frustrated. I don't think even they realized they were starting to get frustrated with it. And so I immediately changed what we were doing to a degree that allowed them to learn a separate technique, but the same lesson. And then being able to do that one gave them confidence enough that they were able to then go back to the original technique that we were doing and accomplish that as well. And I would never have been able to do that at the beginning when we started this podcast. That, like, not that level of being able to adapt on the fly, as well as recognize and then have it all work out the way I wanted it to is it's a level beyond what I originally had.
It is enhanced leadership. But my question to you, and I'm going to get off the mic because I want to hear back from both of you on this question, is, okay, so now that you can do it, now that you're aware that you can do it, at what point do you make the student that you did it to aware as to that's what was done?
That is a dang good question. Well, having not thought about it, and my first reaction is to I'd actually have to think about that for a little while. I'm not sure. That's interesting. Ed, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I guess just from an outside perspective, I think letting people know. So, for instance, like with your student there with frustration, we all have thoughts, feelings going on, and sometimes we don't really even realize what state we're in. And I think that's something that I've gotten a lot better personally, is being introspective of where I'm at and letting people know. Frustration's a tough one, or anger. So it's hard to tell somebody like, hey, listen, you're angry. But letting your student know that they're frustrated, is I think as soon as you recognize something and there's a good way to pass it on to somebody else in a way that's not going to exacerbate a negative emotion, is always good, because if you're good at reading other people, you're probably going to be good at reading yourself. And if people are just kind of getting frustrated without even realizing it, it's good to name it, so that they can feel like, oh, I'm not getting this. And you're like, I think you're frustrated. And it's like, oh, I am feeling frustrated. And now I'm concentrating on what I'm doing to screw up, like with just our whole theme of the conversation. That lens is moved to the dark side during frustration, because now I'm not putting my body in the right position, I'm not doing this. And as that lens shifts further and further over, they're going to get more and more frustrated. Where if you were to call it out and be like, you're frustrated, you're concentrating on what you're not doing right now. Let's call out the frustration, and then you can start concentrating on what you're doing well. So the answer to Shaun's question, I think, is just the appropriate time to not exacerbate a negative emotion, but letting somebody know that you are seeing something in them that maybe they're not seeing in themselves, I think is always a good thing. Obviously, you have to walk carefully sometimes with with saying you're noticing something in someone else, right? Because it takes a humility with the person to say, oh, you're right, I am frustrated, like, or I am mad, because the doubling down effect could really happen there, where, oh, I'm not frustrated, like, this is stupid, right? So yeah, I think it requires some interpersonal skills there, but I think you're doing a service whenever you can help somebody recognize the state that they're in. And we've been doing that, with our backgrounds in training. You're like, oh man, you're in the black, like you gotta just breathe and scan and get back into like the flow state a little bit. And you're like, I was outside, like I was totally in the black there. That's why like that iteration looked like junk. Like, okay, now I'm gonna come down. So it's nice to just let somebody know where you're seeing where they're at. And if you have that relationship, they should typically respond, I think, in a positive way.
That's a good point. I like that a lot. Being able to, I guess, it made me think, I'm not mad, you're mad. Stop being so mad at me. Like, it can rile up very quickly. And it's a bit of a, I can't even say it's much of a challenge now, but I really like that question, Shaun. I'm going to take some time to think about it before I really give you an answer.
And
I
just
have
for
an
anyone else,
interesting. Oh, sorry, Shaun.
Go ahead, Shaun.
just for anyone else out there, how to communicate these things is a skill, and it's something that you won't do right the first time, for sure. Maybe by the 1003rd time, you might be close to doing it right, but you'll need that many iterations to face that many people that are all unique situations in order to kind of create a body of work that allows you to choose options pretty quickly that work. And so you've got to do it wrong a whole bunch of times. So when you're stepping into these moments for the first time, if you're just learning how to communicate like this, like, just not only be cautious, but be like carefully step into it. And so you don't have to say to anyone, you loser, you're frustrated. I mean, you can start with, man, you kind of are giving off a little bit of a frustration vibe. And the only reason I say that is because that's how I look when I'm frustrated. Or make that connection through that commonality of, wow, that was really interesting what you did when you stood up and punched the wall. Why did you do that? So you can help them take a sense of ownership. Or there's just so many ways to do it, not just one way. There's so many ways to interact with a person that you can ease into the conversation without throat punching them and saying, you're frustrated. That'll work for 1 in 1,000 people. And so just be open to the idea that there are many ways to skin a cat, as it were.
That's a great point. Ed, hold on a second.
Sorry, go ahead.
Give me 1 second. I want to hit on these before we got right into the conversation so fast that I just want to touch on these comments before we. I know Dan C's sitting here watching with his comments and I haven't hit him. Good morning, gentlemen. George and the Destroyers were out in the shop and almost missed a notification. Kick some ass. Yes, that came in at the very beginning of the show and we breezed past it so quickly. He then says, when the student recognizes what you've done to change their path, that's when you tell them. Let them evaluate their own behavior. And that's a good point to do it as well. Sorry, Ed, carry on. What were you going to say?
Oh, just touching on what Shaun was saying, I think there was a really important gem in there, and that's approaching people from a common level. Like, so he said, ooh, that's what I look like when I'm frustrated. And I think if you're going to be interacting in a way where you're not criticizing, but you're definitely highlighting things to people, approaching it from the same platform is very important. So if you're standing up on a soapbox saying, I'm the guru, this never happens to me kind of thing, people aren't going to take that well. But when you're talking to them and you're like, I'm a human too. I've been there. I'm just every day working on personal development, just like you. I'm just trying to get the job done a little bit better every day at a time. Then it comes across completely different than if you're kind of preaching, I guess, at them. And so that is like a really fine detail, but it could be the difference between getting a ton of pushback and somebody really listening to what you're saying.
These are great points. It made me think of how it applies to the opposite end of the spectrum as well. In that, if we're talking about frustrating or negative emotions and being able to engage someone on their level in that regard, it also applies to positive emotions. And when people are really joyous, sometimes we can either not be as joyous in the moment or not be attached to them in a way, or even go overboard to the point that you're not really engaging them at the same level on a joyous scale. So even that, as we were talking about in the phone call that you had with the boys, right? Like, one of those guys, you could have been telling that story, and for them, it is a very negative story. And if you're not engaging with them, or if you're engaging with them at a completely different level, then you're just not reading the room. So I just love where we're going. Shaun, you got any other thoughts on any of this?
I do. On your point that you just made, Chance, I feel it's super important. So I'm going to put like an exclamation mark on this one. When you're in these kind of conversations, you've really got to, I feel, I have to pay close attention to who I am, not as to who they are in the moment. And so, with emotions, they can kind of get ramped up. We'll call it the joy emotion. Everyone's like thinking back in the day, we're telling that story about how we're all peeling potatoes at 0430, we got in a potato war. Okay. And so now the whole vibe is so positive, and then it almost gets a little manic. But where is the baseline? Where's the yardstick? Where's the person who is kind of like the even baseline of the moment? Because conversations can lose context or perspective if you get wrapped up in the moment so much that you are now not your baseline. Now you're elevated to a degree where you're almost someone else. And so that can work in two ways against the conversation to some degree for the team. One is it's kind of working against yourself if you get lost in the moment, as it were. So you become not yourself in the conversation, or the other two parties who are in the conversation, they rely on you to some degree as a baseline, as a common touch point, as a grounding factor, or as a we're telling the story right rather than we're telling the story wrong. And I know these are poorly chosen words to make the point, but I think our responsibilities in these moments are to engage in the story, but not be absorbed by the story, because you do kind of have a responsibility to act as sort of a guiding force in the story. And that doesn't mean that you guide the story, but you are part of the conversation to ground it. I'm not putting it across very well, but I think you get the spirit of the message.
Yeah, I think I have something to add to that. Just like the access, we've been using this like slider metaphor. And those two guys like on that call had full access to that slider. but I can think of friends who are in places who wouldn't have access to dial that slider to the kind of I'll just use the dark and the rose color. They just wouldn't have the access currently to slide it to that rose colored thing. So in your point about kind of a moderator in that story, there's probably two guys that would get that rose colored and they're getting that uplifting and good experience from that story. But you also need to read the room where just because you're 10 out of 10 jovial and having this fun time and recounting, if you're giving somebody this rose colored look back and they don't have access to that slider right now, that same story that other guys are getting something positive from is probably going to have the opposite effect to somebody who's not ready to hear that, just based on where they are in their journey or how they're looking back at things, you know. So if you're looking back and they're in a place where maybe they have some anger towards the military or their career, and you just try to shove this happy story down their throat, it's not gonna work, right? So I think it is also just that, in Shaun's point about how, Chance, you've just become really good at reading people, you have to read the room, right? And you know the people around you. And to your point, to putting it out kind of on social media, that is a nice way, because mostly if somebody's going to continue to listen, they're probably in the place where they're liking it, unless they're kind of indulging in this like negative, they want to hear it and just be pissed off about it. But let's hope not a ton of people are indulging in that. But so it is good that is casting the wide net when you put it out and you're sharing that kind of rose colored view. But
Oh, I lost your audio. Ed, I think I lost your audio there, Ed. Yeah, I definitely lost your audio. I'll have to. We'll just keep working on this, and we'll see if it clicks back in. But just hang out with us while we continue chatting. Yeah. Can you not hear? You don't think you can hear us? We'll get him reset in a second. He's made a great point, though. He said, "Do you?" The one question I have on his point, though, is, do you know the person, or do you know the person from 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago? Right? Like, what is the who is the person that you're actually talking to?
Well, I mean, do you even know yourself?
Yeah. Do you know yourself?
You know, you're people often do that. They will externalize the problem, but often the problem is internal, and so they're looking at the person in front of them thinking, do I even know this person anymore? Chances are they know themselves even less. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right.
And one of the things that I find interesting is the person of 10 years ago that you were has changed radically versus the person who's standing in front of you. They're still kind of like a cardboard cutout in your mind. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't know the journey that they've been on in detail. You don't know their inner workings. They're still like a cardboard cutout. And so you've changed significantly. They're still a cardboard cutout. The only way to get that conversation rolling is common ground. And then does the common ground just all rotate around happy, happy, joy, joy stories or super dark stories? Or are you the person who's leading the story to make someone less of a cardboard cutout? That's kind of what I try to do in most conversations nowadays. Is it's not about telling a story, it's about taking it somewhere. I know you do that as well, Chance. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is 100%. Again, I'm going to go back to the reps of this, is the fact that for the last 3 years, this is what I've been practicing, is being able to read in the moment not just what's being talked about, but what are the underpinnings of what's being talked about. Why are we talking about it in the meantime? So to relay it to the being able to sit around with the boys and tell a story and be like, yeah, man, this was such a great time. Everything was awesome. I now have the ability to not only do that, but gauge the room to the point that I can find the right median for the group. And it is it has paid dividends. Paid dividends. Ed, are you back with us? Can you hear us now? You're all good?
Yeah, I cut out for a second there, so I missed a small bit, but I'm tracking now, so we're good.
Okay. You got any thoughts on anything that you have heard so far?
Um, a ton. No, yeah, I think just along the same with you is when you said kind of finding that median in the room. I think it's just made me think about the changing. You're going to be a different person in the restaurant with your family than you are in the garage lifting weights with a few of the guys telling stories, and just that. I feel that is some people are missing that reading of the room, that barometer where a story in the garage is appropriate, but a story out for dinner with the family needs to have a different tone. I guess that's just what kind of pinged in my mind with that self-realization of I guess what's appropriate and how you're reading people.
Yeah, I dig it. I can't tell you how many times I have been able to use it now intentionally. This is the beautiful part, is that I can actually use it intentionally now versus not. I got a comment here from Daniel Labonte, jumped in here. Good to see you, buddy. He says, should one take a person's past in a superficial sense to avoid biases at the present moment on how one can have decent discussions? Can one take a person's past in a superficial sense to avoid biases at the present moment? Oh, so Daniel, you're going to have to hit me back on this one, but is the question that we can look at our past and not have it affect our decisions right now? I'm not quite sure. Shaun, do you got any read on this?
Well, very quickly as I read it, I'm just thinking of this. Do you evaluate the person based on their past or not? And how much weight do you put on that evaluation? So as an example, use myself as a case study, former JTF2. That should mean something to people who are maybe not in the game, but who recognize the title. But so many people misattribute that title to something that it's not. Maybe I was a former operator, but that doesn't mean I'm a big deal. It just means I'm a guy with a past that did some things and learned some lessons. But that title in itself doesn't create some sort of super abilities or these things that people create in their minds as, well, that's what I represent. And so I feel that the past, you're both combat engineers. I recognize that. I understand that, with that comes a certain mindset, a certain experience, a certain trajectory, if you will. But I only keep that as a loose framing. When I look at you, I don't think of you as a combat engineer. I think of you as a human. I don't think of you as a veteran. I think of you as a friend. I don't think of you as a label. I think of you as something more. And so if I'm reading Daniel's question correctly, yeah, I take all of the things into account, but they are all just tiny little data points that I do in an instant, all upstream and all unaware through my perception. But the moment that I start saying a word, those words or those thoughts are driven by who's in front of me, like this moment. So I won't talk to Chance or I won't talk to Ed as if 10 years ago you used to be ... I'll be talking to the person real time in front of me right now. But all that superficial stuff, all that background, I'll use as data points.
So there's an interesting idea that I just had about this, is that it depends on what that person needs in the moment. Because there were times where the warrant officer, had to talk to the master corporal, right? There were times where you needed to use that tool to affect me in the way that you needed to have happen for this show to do what we were doing. But there was a point where that wasn't needed, and you engaged the person, the Chance Burles, not Master Corporal Burles. And then there were other times that you needed to hit the athlete Chance. Like, now we're just going to you need to do that. And so it's being able to not only utilize all those data points, but then put them together in the time frames that they're needed. And I think this is a beautiful point. That's a great thing.
All I'm doing is applying heuristics. I'm just applying shortcuts. So, if you have to be efficient and effective or expeditious in whatever you're doing, you've got to look for the fastest vector into the moment that executes against the outcome that you're seeking or the person's seeking. And so it's just shortcuts, heuristics, you know what I'm saying? But you understand that, of course.
Patterns for
Yeah,
sure.
I think I have a small bit to add would be exactly how Shaun said it. Like you're getting a quick snapshot. This is going to help you probably communicate in a way, but making sure to check your own biases. Like you said, you were part of the JTF. If I have some interesting views or something about somebody who is in the JTF and I start talking to you like that, instead of, like you said, as a person and just using that as a weighted background kind of data point, then you might have a weird conversation because you have this own bias of yourself against somebody's background. Say it's, it doesn't matter, something that's a little bit more edgy or something, and so you're talking to them in a certain way, and you're, instead of reading them as a person, you're taking too much of a bias out of their background. I mean, for us, it's pretty safe. If you're talking to somebody in the military, you kind of been through that experience, so you have your own informed kind of data point there. But maybe it's somebody who's in something you haven't done, and all you have is your personal opinion, and that might be not 100%. So I think just balancing that with everything with a grain of salt, like it's going to inform your decision but not make it.
Yeah, and I think this is it's a great what we're talking about in terms of leadership and engaging with other people, engaging ourselves, is so important in the conversation of looking back at your own history, because these stories, as we've said, can be exceptionally emotionally driven, right? And it can take you to a place that perhaps you hadn't been in a while. And so being able to utilize all these lessons through something else like conversations, like being able to use artwork or writing or journaling or whatever it is that you do, meditation, jujitsu, whatever it is, being able to take the lessons from there and then applying them back to your own memory of these moments to get a better baseline. I know I do this all the time. If I have a little mini flashback while I'm driving down the road and there's a friggin' bag of garbage on the side of the road, and there's that little thing still in the back of my brain that peeks up and is like, whoa, what about that? Well, now I can utilize all of the other patterns I have to overlay that memory that my brain is trying to take me to, and go, okay, hold on a second. Was it really as bad as it was? Was the stress at that moment as high as it was? Sure. Is it now? No. Okay, cool. Let's back it off a little bit. And they all just apply to each other. And I think this is just a fantastic conversation. Shaun, you got any other thoughts before we run out of time here?
Well, I'm curious as to what Ed thinks in respect to looking back now, and I don't want to make too fine of a point and use his conversation with his two friends as the only baseline that we've got, but it's current and it's relevant. And so, based on the conversation that we've had so far, Ed, looking back at that conversation, I'm not saying would you do it different, but do you have any new thoughts on how that conversation unfolded now?
You know what? It's because we've come full circle and I'm on here talking about it with you guys. It has become the exact roadmap that you kind of laid out. So we had this conversation, and then maybe it could have ended there, but now it's come forward and we're talking about it here, where I'm getting to share it, and hopefully somebody's gonna gain something from it, or they're thinking of their own story. It doesn't have to be with the military, it could be anything, where they're looking back on maybe a hard time or something, and they're looking at it with a more friendly lens. And then the knock-on effect is hopefully they're calling their buddy that was involved, and he's calling his buddy or her buddy, or they're sharing this podcast. So I think overall that conversation has come to fruition of exactly the roadmap we wanted it to. Yeah, I think so. If I had to shine a lens on it, is there something more I could do? Probably yes. Like, having this conversation is definitely outside my comfort zone. So that was a big step to kind of come on here and do that. But there's probably, when I think about this, there's probably people in my head right now where I think they could use a positive conversation like that. And so even taking note of that and remembering, hey, I'm gonna call so and so after this and just say I was on a podcast and we had this fun conversation. And so really it taking it a step further is kind of the helping the others with it. So it's come to a cool point for me.
I dig it. I dig it. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
awesome. Daniel jumped in here a little second ago. He said it's similar to when you give courses and the first thing you do is ask around people's experience and background. That gives you an internal check of how and to what point you can proceed. That's a great point. I ask that quite a bit on any students I have on the mats is, do you have any other martial arts experience? And then that gives me at least a gauge as to how they can move their body. I ask if they've been an athlete at all. That way I can have an idea of their general proprioception. But I want to just say thank you guys because this has been an awesome conversation. We're just about an hour right now, and I want to see if there's any final thoughts, anything still bubbling in the back of your brain about living the good old days today. What do you got, Ed?
Yeah, I guess my thought would be just be we've been using this slider analogy, and if you have access to that slider in your brain right now, and you know people who don't, that take advantage of it and pass it along, and kind of share that. It just sharing that feeling and positive attitude, and you never know how far those knock-on effects can go to not just the person you're calling, but their family. And yeah, so just trying to grasp, if you have a positive mindset right now, just don't be afraid to share it.
Bam, I love it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll use Ed's slider analogy to shine the light on him. I haven't been tracking Ed that long, but I've tracked him long enough in his social media account to see how he's trying to figure out ways to do it better. When I see someone engaged in social media trying to serve in a way that is improvement in themselves and trying to improve those around them, I love sticking around to see how they do it differently each day or how they do it differently each week, how they evolve. And I've been watching Ed evolve, and it's no easy gig, social media. I mean, I've been doing it now for a little while. I feel way more confident than I used to with social media, but I still think I suck. So I have to keep pushing the envelope. I have to keep making the mistakes. I have to keep trying to put out a message that I feel is appropriate for the time in different ways that hit different people. And that is the trick. Communication on social media is difficult. I see many veterans nowadays just putting up a photo and there's no verbiage to it. It's just a photo. And it's hard to connect if there's no feeling with the words, with the photo. So I used to be that way. My wife used to say to me, use your words, because I didn't know how to communicate on social media. I didn't know how to communicate with some humans. They just didn't resonate with me, or I didn't vibe with them, or that's one of the tricks that we have to get better at as veterans, I'm afraid, is communicating better, more fully, more completely, more wholly, as it were. So that's my thoughts as I was listening to Ed. We all got to get better at it, but I appreciate watching you get better at it on the daily, Ed.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you, Shaun.
Yeah, it is the ability to not only want to serve, but then to serve. And the best way to serve is to look internally and build yourself so that you can provide an example. Like, it's just goes right back to the principle, one of the principles of leadership, right? It's just lead by example. Be the change you want to see. And when you start doing it, it's crazy the amount of change that you start to see because you are looking and engaging with the world in a completely different way. And I am so thankful in my own life that I started to do it, because as soon as I started to be who I wanted to see out in the world, and that's who I see. And with my social media, that's what I see now, is people looking to improve themselves and people wanting to improve the rest of the world with providing information or providing services or just constantly trying to expand upon themselves, which is fantastic. So
Yeah, and pulling your friends in, by the way.
yeah,
You know, like I'm not going to say it. I don't want to say it bluntly, but it's the best way I can say it to make a point. This show, you've had several people on the show, Chance, that are more personally connected to you than just, a guest from Australia or from England that we've never met or whatever the case is. But having Ed on the show, to some degree, for me at least, feels like these are all little personal milestones where you're not dragging your old back in the day friends into the game, but where you're recognizing them, where you're making them part of the team, your team, a team to some degree that they weren't part of up until like at 11 o'clock this morning. Now Ed's part of the team. He's been on the podcast. He's podcast team, which is different than when you're not on the podcast. And I can freaking assure you that the moment that this podcast finishes, Ed's going to be nodding his head like, whoa, that was a lot. Because live podcasting is a lot, man. But now he's experienced it. But I love the fact that he's experienced it through an on-ramping from his friend, from someone that he knows from back in the day, that shared rations together, you know what I mean? So Chance, I just want to call it out that it doesn't happen that often that you have, these kind of moments, but I feel it. I don't know if you feel it,
oh yeah,
but I feel it. I just wanted to call it out.
I appreciate it. This is it is super fun being able to bring boys from back in the day onto the show, because not only do I get I'm a little bit selfish in the fact that it's awesome to see Ed, but it's awesome to see Ed now, because I remember Ed from back in the day, right? And I want to update that person in my head constantly. So being able to engage with friends from back then just marries the two images up. Like I got to the one person I've been thinking of throughout this whole episode is John McLeod, and man, McLeod and I go back all the way. He'll probably never be on the podcast, but I'm going to keep bugging him. But it's those the people in your life from those periods of time are really important to keep in touch with, so that you can continually update that person, and it's beautiful to see. It really is. So I love it. And as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Gmo. Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.